Up, everybody? Let's talk Jets radio. I'm gonna try something a little bit different here. You guys have probably noticed that the last couple weeks dealing with a lot of shit, haven't really been able to spend the usual time that I like to do, answering all the comments and just getting back to all the feedback, which I always appreciate. I always read the comments, but answering them obviously takes a very very long time when usually there's anywhere between 100 or 200 comments. So I figured it might actually be easier if I just turn the screen record on and just start from the bottom and read through a bunch of them and just give my opinions on them and we'll see how long it takes. Probably a lot shorter than the hour and a half it usually takes to go through all of them. So why didn't they just take Mike White out of the game because he was playing injured? They should have put in Flacco. Tyson was saying the same thing during the stream. I personally would have been fine just sticking with how they did it, rolling with Mike White, unless he was legitimately injured, hurting. I know there were some throws out there that he didn't look comfortable. If you really thought that he was limited because of the ribs, sure, you could take him out. I just don't think things were going to get any better with Flacco in there. Yeah, your season's on the line. This is your last chance. Do you at least take a look? Give him a drive, maybe. But still, I felt like at least in the first half, White looked pretty good. Aside from that first interception, he made a couple good throws after that. There were a couple drops mixed in there. And, I didn't think it was all on him, really. So I felt he deserved an opportunity to at least try to figure it out. I didn't think anything better was happening with Flacco. Time to pay receipts, fellas. Yep, plenty of receipts. There's going to be plenty of receipts all offseason. Saleh might get fired. Don't be shocked. Mike White and Flacco will be gone. Zach and a new veteran quarterback will compete to be starter next season. I don't think Saleh is going to get fired. The one thing, and I was talking with my dad about this, that might happen is if the Jets completely lay down next week, even though the game means absolutely nothing. I think there's a good chance you probably see guys like Fant and Dwayne Brown and a bunch of veterans that have been nicked up all year probably not even play. But if the Jets come out completely lifeless again and just absolutely get blown out, Dolphins end up getting in the playoffs or whatever it is, um, then maybe that changes things a little bit. Where all right, you ended the season losing six in a row. Not in a glamorous fashion by any means. Your quarterback regressed. A lot of things that you can look at. And if you're talking about having a coach entering the hot seat on year three, it just seems like if we're going by past history, other than maybe I guess like Tom Coughlin, I don't remember many coaches off the top of my head that we're legitimately on the hot seat without much of a proven resume that completely turn it around and win championships. So you're also looking back to 2008, where Mangini had a great start to that year. It was also his third year, but he had a great start to that season. And then we all know what happened. Favre was playing injured, and the team completely collapsed in similar fashion towards the end of the season. With of course Chad Pennington, a former Jets quarterback, putting the final nail in the coffin, very similar to what Geno Smith did. But I don't think Saleh's going to get fired. I do think that Flacco is obviously going to be gone. I think that Mike White kind of coming back down to earth this week. Um, I don't think you're going to see many teams that are going to give him any kind of crazy contract. So I think there's a good chance actually that Mike White comes back somewhere around like 3 to 4, maybe 5 million. But he's not going to be, your QB1. It's probably Mike White with Zach competing to be your backup, and then you bring in somebody like I see a lot of people talking about Carr. I don't dislike him, but I don't know if I want to pay what he's getting. I think for the next 3 years. So a lot of things to figure out there. If you think this is bad, they'll probably play the Dolphins' third string quarterback next week and probably still lose. The defense has been figured out, and the offense under Mike LaFleur has always underwhelmed. Their good games, I know, are few and far between. If all these coaches return, there's something seriously wrong. Yeah, I mean, the defense definitely feels like it's been figured out at this point. We've been saying that for a few weeks, where teams are just avoiding Sauce and Reed and attacking the linebackers, attacking the safeties, where the Jets seem pretty slow. Quarterbacks are getting the ball out quick. There's not much of a pass rush. Quarterbacks are getting outside the pocket, using their legs. It just seems like the Jets really haven't adjusted much on defense over the last month and a half. And even looking at the final scores of games, you could say, all right, they're keeping the team in it, but there's a lot of long drives. They're not taking the ball away. They just don't have that killer instinct that it seemed like they had early in the year. This is a disaster. Too many question marks going forwards and no quarterback. I do not have any confidence in the coaching staff either. I think they will be around for another year, and then it's going to be a whole new regime change in 2024, meaning we are years away from contenders. Oh, man. Wasting away the careers of Garrett Wilson, Sauce, and Quinn, and that's my fear, that once these guys are, really starting to get into their prime and become like those legitimate playmakers like Quinnen is now, like Garrett and Sauce are already showing flashes of, being that, top tier receiver and corner. You would think they're only going to get better. Hopefully, things can kind of turn around a little bit where, by the time they're entering free agency, they want to stay Jets and there's a winning kind of culture here. But yeah, I mean, as far as the rest of the staff, to me, everybody's a question mark right now. I was a pretty big fan of LaFleur the past 2 years, but towards the end of the season this year, it's just been a lot of question marks, a lot of questionable play calling, questionable decisions. The usage of certain players like Elijah Moore, we've talked about all year. LaFleur doesn't get a free pass, not by any means. We could talk about the development of Zach as well. Him, Saleh, they don't have a history of developing quarterbacks. I wanted to give LaFleur a pass on the offense just because for a while it was always looking pretty decent when other quarterbacks were in there. But I think you kind of have to look at things going forward as far as, are you drafting another quarterback or is the plan just to get a veteran? If the plan's to get a veteran, I think LaFleur's probably back because I think, at least I feel like we've seen enough from his system where I feel like with a little bit more continuity and some of these young players like Garrett and Moore getting a little bit more comfortable and knowing what's expected that this should get better. Continuity is a good thing if you have the right people. But if you don't have the right people, obviously you're just kind of wasting your time. So I'm at least willing to see another year. But somebody I feel like is probably going to be a scapegoat. Maybe it is Ulbrich. Who knows? Maybe they just bring in a quarterback coach like this next comment, Frank Reich, or Bill O'Brien as OC, Brian Flores as DC. But again, now is that something that Saleh would be willing to do? Does he trust Ulbrich at this point to run the kind of defense that he wants? I mean, a lot of questions there. Mike White was clearly hurt, and they threw him out because they had no options. He's going to get the brunt of the uninformed hate, though. The D gives up huge plays, big, giant chunks. No, I mean, listen, that's fair, and I think that's part of why they didn't make the change with Flacco. I think they still just felt that Mike White gave him the best chance to win. Even 80% of Mike White gave them a better chance to win over Joe Flacco. Kevin, you're exactly right about coaching. How many flat games have we seen this year and last? How many games with piss poor calls? How many examples of lacking discipline, game management, etc.? Saleh said his job isn't to motivate players. That's exactly what his job is, and he's done a lousy job thus far. His shortcomings far exceed his positives. He's not the head coach for us, and we need to clean the coaching house out again. Sad. That's quite a comment. A lot of stuff there. I listen. So the team, yes, has come out flat on several occasions. I think if we're looking at the totality of this year, I felt like for a while Saleh was doing a really good job. I felt like he was holding players accountable. I felt like he pushed a lot of the right buttons, with certain situations with, Elijah Moore, with Denzel Mims, even, benching Zach at the right time, I thought was the right call. We could all question, whether or not he should have pulled the plug on some of those games at halftime or in the third quarter, which he didn't do. There was the time management lapse, that we could look at as well 2 weeks ago. So yeah, I mean he's far from perfect, but yeah, with the playoffs on the line these last few weeks, the way the teams come out flat, the way they've been thoroughly outcoached in pretty much all facets of the game, it's absolutely concerning. And yeah, his job is to motivate players. I think that his receipts comment earlier in the year it did to some extent motivate players. I think they looked at that as Saleh having their back, and they responded and they played well for a few weeks after that. But ultimately, it didn't last. And again, is that a reflection on him? Is that a reflection on the players? Who knows? But that's what sucks. Going into this offseason with so many questions now. SELL, sell, do it, Woody. Not holding my breath on that one. No one look at Sam's 341-yard, 3-touchdown, 1 interception day. He also had a fumble, I think maybe 2 fumbles as well. I'm not going to go into the whole Sam stuff. I've seen a lot of that on Twitter. You guys, if you've followed this channel long enough, you obviously know that I was a big Sam Darnold supporter a couple years ago. I wanted the Jets to keep him more so, to maximize what they could get back for that number 2 overall pick. I didn't even care at the time if they picked up his 5th-year option. For me, it was just looking at the roster, looking at how many holes we had, and saying, what's the best way to propel this thing forward? And I felt that it was with, 2 first-round picks, an additional 2 first-round picks, and then moving down from number 2 and solidifying the offensive line or getting a number 1 playmaker, something like that. That was what I wanted to do at the time. And it just sucks that you had a guy like Fields there, who I always thought was the number two guy. They didn't take him, and they talked themselves into Zach. And unfortunately, right now you got Gino playing well. You got Sam, who's kind of up and down. I'm not upset that we don't have Sam right now. I'm more upset that we don't have the picks from trading number two, which I think would definitely help right now, and it also would have delayed the quarterback decision where you could have went out and got a veteran. You'd have those excess first round picks to trade. I think the Dolphins, when they moved from 3 to 12, they got a first round pick last year, another one this year, which I think they lost from the tampering, and then number 12 overall from the Niners. So. And they also got a third round pick, I think, at either last year or this year. So that was quite a haul, and I think the Jets could have used that instead of just bringing another young quarterback in with guys that don't have a proven resume to build a quarterback. Um, Chest just in season though, I guess. I don't know. Another BS year. Tired of it. Me too, man. We've been doing this show since 2015. That's 8 full seasons that we've been covering this team week after week after week, and somehow we still don't have a playoff game to talk about. It's amazing. Get a quarterback, and we'll see you next season. That's the only, I guess, reason to feel somewhat optimistic is that it still feels like if you bring a healthy AVT and Brees Hall back, that you put a quarterback with the rest of these playmakers on offense, and this should be a pretty damn good offense. And even if the defense isn't the vaunted top 5 defense that we thought they might be in the first half of the year, there's still enough talent. There's still enough playmakers on that defense. Especially if they add another pass rusher, or if Jermaine Johnson or Michael Clemens takes the next step, or if they bring back Bryce Huff. Like they've got enough playmakers on defense where I feel like they should be good enough. Where if you throw a quarterback into the mix who can put up points on offense, this should be a playoff team next year. Zero excuses. If Saleh is back, for me, it's a playoff mandate. There's no excuses. Feels like 2008 all over again in the matter of where they were and how they. I was just talking about that a little while. It's funny. I was just talking about that a few minutes ago. Yeah, it feels exactly like 2008. The collapse, obviously, again, it was a little different with Brett Favre and him being injured, but feels just like 2008. Former quarterback, final nail in the coffin, Chad to Gino. It's incredible, really, how history repeats itself. Have a good time. Find your love. Right? If anybody needs some love, you can go to that channel. This is going to be a very interesting offseason, no doubt about it. I'm not looking forward to it. All the quarterback debates, the head coaching debates. Obviously, people are going to want, LaFleur, Ulbrich fired. One of them might go. I don't think both are going to go. So I just feel like everyone's going to be upset. Everyone's going to be angry. And then the outsiders are going to be talking about the toxic fan base, which I think I'm pretty sure I saw a few comments. We'll get to those in a little bit. Terrible quarterback play held y'all back. I'm sorry. Y'all future is bright into White and Wilson, though White and Wilson ain't it. Well, yeah, I feel like the future could be bright. Again, depending on how healthy Brees Hall and ABT come back next year. You got a nice young nucleus from this past draft to work with, which is good. But ultimately, we keep saying it: quarterback, head coach. Those are the two most important things. If you don't have those two things, it's a tough road ahead. What a joke! I think this year is worse than last year. Oof. They are going to destroy Garrett and Gardner, arguably the best Jets in a long time. If they run it back again with the same comedians, Woody, do whatever it takes to get Peyton and Carr. No more gambling from Douglas. Make the high percentage moves or get on your bike. Woo! Shane Dumbro with some fire there. Listen, I'm not going to say they're going to destroy Garrett and Gardner, but to me, those are two players that are just they're dogs, they're alphas, and they legitimately want to win. And if they feel like they're part of a losing culture, obviously, I don't think they're going to do the Jamal Adams thing and just bow out. But I think winning is very important to them. And if they don't feel like the structure is in place around them, whether it's GM, head coach, whatever, at a certain time, yeah, they'll probably be like, yo, I'm done with this. I want out. I want to trade. I want to go somewhere that I have a legitimate chance to win. Obviously, I think getting paid is probably the most important thing for most players, but a lot of these guys they do want a chance to win. They do want a chance to be part of winning organizations, and I think that's Garrett and that's Sauce. Those guys want to win. They're elite players at what they do. So hopefully the Jets can get it all figured out around them. Douglas, most overrated person in Jets history. Only thing he's consistent with is eating. Oh my God! Wow. Listen, I think Douglas deserves some criticism a lot more than he's been given. He's gotten a free pass. He got a free pass that first year where he didn't really do anything. He came in after the offseason was done with Adam Gase. The first offseason after that was kind of viewed as more, all right, let's clean house. Let's get rid of some of these bad contracts. Let's not sign any bad contracts that are going to hamper us for the next 2 to 3 years. So like really his first 2 years were pretty much completely written off. And then, the big decisions were made last year at head coach and at quarterback. Right now, his two biggest decisions are still two giant question marks. And he's supposed to be an offensive line guru. There's a legitimate chance that we're still replacing two or three guys on the offensive line going into next year. Assuming you have a healthy AVT back, he's one of your starters, whether it's at guard or tackle. And then Laken Tomlinson, because of his contract, you have no choice but to bring him back. McGovern's a free agent. Fant's a free agent. Dwayne Brown, he's under contract. Is he going to play? He might retire. You have Max Mitchell. Do you trust him as a starter going into year two? He was okay in moments when he played this year. I mean, you have a lot of questions on this offensive line, considering all the investments that have been made, all the you get 2 first-round picks into the offensive line with Becton and AVT. Is Becton going to be healthy next year? For all the moves that have been made on the O-line, there's a lot of questions. And even in free agency, and this is something I was talking about in my last video, you look at all of the free agent moves that Joe Douglas has made, and he's touted as a guy that's not going to overspend, that gets great value, that doesn't give out bad contracts. But, I said in my video, other than the DJ Reed contract, is there any other contract that you can look at on the Jets right now and say that player is exceeding what he's getting paid? And I don't think there's anybody. The tight ends are not worth what they're getting paid. Mosley, very, very good player, not worth $20 million, I don't think. Carl Lawson, very good player, has flashes, not an elite $15 million a year pass rusher. He's got 7 sacks this year. Who's the guy that's exceeded their contract that Joe Douglas has signed in the last 3 years? George Fant, his first 2 years was good. Other than that, not so much. He's had a couple good under the radar signings. Picking out JFM, from waivers and extending him. Obviously, JFM's still getting paid a decent amount, probably not worth what he's getting paid either. Guys like Quincy Williams and under the radar moves like that. But this past draft really saved him. Getting Sauce, getting Garrett, Breece Hall, AVT last year. To me, those 4 players ultimately are probably going to be the core and the young nucleus going forward, and really what saves Douglas's job and at least gives him another year to find the quarterback and evaluate the head coach a little bit longer. Prime, you called it out last week. The wins were against backup quarterbacks, and still the NFL is a hard league to win in, but outside of Buffalo, ain't no real good wins. Good teams don't drop 5 in a row, not in basketball, baseball, soccer, Pee Wee football, not in nothing. Wasted season, off season with a lot to figure out. Yeah, I tried to dismiss a lot of the talk about the backup quarterbacks early in the year. Just because, again, like there were good vibes around the team. You don't want to, downplay any wins. The team was looking good. They were playing good defense. They were running the ball well. Obviously, there were still some struggles at the quarterback position. But I feel like the thought all along was that this is still a young team getting over that rebuild hump. And, now that they're starting to play good football, it felt like the best football should have been ahead of them. And, unfortunately it wasn't. And now it just gives, it gives a lot of ammo to all those talks and debates from earlier in the year that, the Jets just beat backup quarterbacks and they got lucky in a few games. And they caught some teams like, the Broncos and the Packers at the right time, teams that we thought were going to be pretty good that weren't. Fire someone, cut coaches. Yeah, someone's definitely, it would be very surprising if nobody got fired and they just run it all back next year. The one scenario I gave on the show is that, if they do run it all back, I think that should be a decision that Woody gives to Joe Douglas and basically says, if you're not going to, fire anybody, if you're not going to demand that Saleh fires anybody, then you guys are all in this together and you've got a playoff mandate next year. Team has to make the playoffs or you're all going to go down and we'll figure it out after that. I don't know if that's realistic or not, but, I think the one thing we don't want is ownership meddling in personnel decisions again. We've been down that path before, and even if it does mean like a Sean Payton or somebody like that, do we really want Woody Johnson hopping back in here and starting to make moves? It feels like, or at least it felt like, for the first time in a very long time, that there was a nice structure within the organization where we weren't talking about arranged marriages or a head coach that was forced to work with a GM that was forced to work with a head coach like Idzik and Rex, or Bowles and McCagnon. Like it felt like these two guys were on the same page. I felt like there was enough progress in the first half of the year that I'd at least want to see another year. But somebody's going to roll when you lose 5 in a row and collapse like this. I would much rather suck the whole year losing a bunch of games rather than enduring this horrible collapse. I kind of feel the same way. I'm not gonna lie to you. I kind of feel the same way. Losing like this absolutely sucks. Whenever you put the words "must win" and Jets in the same sentence, disaster is guaranteed to happen. Amen. And Douglas, in my opinion, did okay because Garrett and Sauce, anyone playing Madden could have picked them. Zach, top 10 bust. Becton bust, so he is 50-50 in top picks. Corey Davis, waste of money. Whitehead did what? I don't think he did a bad job, but he ain't do no top job the first 3 round picks this year anyone would have picked up. Corey Davis, not worth the contract. Been injured too much. Drop balls. Whitehead, he's been okay, but again, not worth what he's getting paid. The Zach pick, I mean, we know what that is right now. I think they're still going to take some time, try to evaluate him, but the Becton pick obviously doesn't look good with Wirfs there. A lot of question marks. A lot of question marks. I'm not going to take anything away also from the Garrett and Sauce picks. A lot of people wanted Thibodeau, which still would have been a great pick at the time. A lot of people were talking about other receivers as well, Treylon Burks and guys like that. So I'm going to give Douglas some credit for this past draft, but free agency and his first 2 drafts, clearly a lot of questions. The issues are beyond Wilson. Yes, uh, yes, with an asterisk, I guess, because to me, at least like the first 15 games until Mike White came back, I mean, uh, you really look at the way the Jets were losing, and I mean, it's hard to say that the team was losing because of defense. It's hard to say the team was losing because of their running game. Are there issues beyond Wilson? Absolutely. Are they able to get a pass rush without blitzing? Last 5-6 games, no, they haven't. The defense just looks soft, vanilla, predictable. Offense can't do anything in the red zone. Yeah, there's a lot of issues beyond Zach, but I also feel like in all those games that he was in, he was not doing anything to help anybody or elevate anybody. And in a lot of the games that we did see without Zach, there was a different flow and a different rhythm to the offense. So I don't know what you want to make out of the Seattle game. Do you want to say it was just Mike White coming back down to earth and teams adjusted to him? Perhaps. Maybe he was also completely injured and the ribs were messed up and he shouldn't have been out there. I mean, who knows? But I do think Wilson was the biggest problem this year. But you're absolutely right. The issues with this team go well beyond just him. It's coaching, it's game prep, it's in-game adjustments. There's a lot of things. Need a veteran quarterback. That is where it starts. Enough of this and draft 4 offensive linemen. Completely agree. Completely agree. The only way I would consider drafting a quarterback, I said this during the stream, is if you're going to guarantee me that he's going to he's going to sit on the bench for at least 2 years. If he's not sitting on the bench for at least a full season, if not 2 years, then I don't want anything to do with drafting another quarterback. Especially again, if you're keeping Saleh, you're keeping LaFleur. This past experiment didn't work out. I don't know if I really trust them to try to develop another one. Fire everyone. That'd be funny. Again, wouldn't surprise me with Woody, man. Woody can do some crazy shit after collapse. We saw it in 2008. He fired Mangini. Wouldn't shot. I just don't think it's going to happen. The only reason it could happen, I think, again, is because he was not here when these hires were made. So who knows, what he thinks of, the job that Douglas and Saleh have done. Who knows what the interactions are like behind closed doors. So we'll see. I'm numb to the pain. I wish I was numb to it. This shit still sucks. Why is everyone now finally seeing there are other problems? Because Zach wasn't there to blame. Well, that's not entirely wrong, but in the games that Zach was starting, most of them that they lost, you could look at him as being the primary problem. And even in the games that they won, the Denver game, the Packer game, he didn't do anything to help you win those games. You had a great running game and you had a great defense that was shutting teams out. So, in those games, you could look at the defense and say, good job. Like they carried the team for a lot of games. The defense has carried the team this year. So as much as we're shitting on them now, and it's deserved, they've come back down to earth. They were flat in the biggest game of the year. I think they deserve all the criticism. But for much of the year, the defense and the running game were carrying the team, and Zach was the biggest problem. He's not the only problem. He's clearly not the only problem. There are many issues on this team, many issues on this roster and with this coaching staff, but he's still, I think, the biggest problem, or at least the quarterback position is the biggest problem. Let's all mail in our receipts. Not renewing my tickets, I can tell you that. Maybe I'll rebuy after the offseason. Don't worry, they will be dying to sell tickets for those who are delusional and think there's a waiting list. I remember when there actually used to be a waiting list. It was 20,000 people long back in Giant Stadium. You couldn't get tickets to a Jet game. You could not get tickets to it. I think like you would move up maybe like 100 spots every year because people wouldn't give up their season tickets. It was, it was a luxury to have them, and now it's amazing what they've done to it. Wake me up when they have a quarterback and coach who are not morons. Ouch. Next year's quarterback not on the roster. At least we figured that out now. I guess if you want to look at it that way, that's a positive way of looking at it. That if and this is what I was bringing up on Friday night, that if Mike White balled out and then he gets a huge contract and then he comes back down to earth next year, that really screws you up for the future. But by him playing the way he did last night, it's hard to imagine any team signing him to any kind of crazy contract or where he's getting more than like $6-7 million a year. So I think there's a good chance he's back with the team, just not as a starter. Somebody better get fired, period. I can't stand this head coach or the OC. And the punter should be cut right now. Punter should have been cut weeks ago, months ago. And I think somebody probably will get fired. The hard part is that who would you pinpoint and say that's the guy that has to go? Because for much of the year, like I was just saying, the defense was carrying the team. So should it be Ulbrich? For the offense, like I was also saying, for many of the games that Zach wasn't out there, the offense was flowing. You had a decent passing game, and you moved the football. If you want to use, some of the things that have happened with player personnel decisions and not using guys the right way, the lack of red zone execution, if you want to use that and fire LaFleur, go ahead. Now, if you're bringing back Zach for year 3, I mean, now is he learning a new system? Is that going to set him back? I think some of the decision with LaFleur is probably going to tie into what the plan is at quarterback. If you're bringing Wilson back for another year, you're probably sticking with LaFleur and you're not going to teach Zach an entire new system. If you're bringing in a veteran, like a proven veteran, that might depend on the system that veteran likes to run. You're probably not going to force Lamar Jackson to run, a West Coast offense unless LaFleur is able to adjust to what he does well. I don't know if that's an experiment that they'd want to go down, but we'll see. A lot of things to still be figured out. People, the only way Saleh gets fired this year is if he refuses to put forth Mike LaFleur as a sacrificial lamb. Hell, throw in Ulbrich as well. The coaching is the issue here. New quarterback, new OC, new DC, all with proven record of results. That's going to be tough for Saleh, though. I mean, he doesn't strike me as the guy that's going to throw his coaching staff under the bus. It's also his defense. LaFleur could definitely end up being the guy that, kind of gets the blame for a lot of this, especially with, Zach going downhill and, getting benched and everything that happened with that. Wouldn't surprise me at all if LaFleur ends up taking the blame. See, the coach on New York Giants, that's a coach. Well, the job that Daboll did is friggin' impressive. Not his roster, not his quarterback, and all phases of that team just played well all year. So you give him credit, you give the Giants credit. Woody needs to call Sean Payton now. Even if Woody calls Sean Payton, why is Sean Payton answering the phone call? Why is he coming to the Jets? Is Woody Johnson going to pay Sean Payton? Probably not. And even if he is willing to pay him, is Sean Payton coming to the New York Jets without a quarterback? Without a draft pick to get a quarterback? Unless Aaron Rodgers, Lamar Jackson, somebody like that's coming here, I highly doubt Sean Payton is coming here. Heads have got to roll, same old shit every day, every year. It's not a simple matter of firing Saleh. You have to replace him with someone better. And the only coach that's better is Sean Payton. But Sean Payton is not going to a team without a franchise, like I was just saying, not going to a team without a franchise quarterback. All their candidates have less experience as a head coach. Until the Jets get a franchise quarterback in place, they won't get a better coach. That was the same argument 2 years ago. The number 1 overall pick. You have that, you probably get the top head coach. Probably get Peterson or somebody else working with Trevor Lawrence. Top quarterback gets you the top coach, and Jets don't have it. We need a new coach, get Sean Payton. A lot of Sean Payton comments. Fortunately, I just don't think it's going to happen. Lots of self-scouting needs to happen this offseason, amen. I know players have to perform, but in a past league with some of the players on the offense, this offense is sorry. I think a coaching change on offense might need to happen. You might be right. You might be right. I think there's a lot of self-scouting that needs to happen on both sides of the ball. With the way that teams adjusted to the defense second half of the year, with the offense and just the issues with quarterback, not scoring in the red zone, there's a lot of self-scouting that the Jets need to do this offseason, absolutely. I've never seen a coach so disinterested in what's going on the field as Saleh. He makes Todd Bowles look animated. He gets next year, if there is no further improvements, such as signing an established quarterback, i.e. Derek Carr, he should be sent packing. There is too much young talent on the team that needs coaching and direction. Well said there. We've been saying the same thing with Saleh for a while, where it just feels like in those moments where he's good or when the team is good, he gives you those those clips where he's fired up, he's screaming, he's that rah rah guy that the players can like, and he gives you great quotes when things are going well, and he's an inspirational guy and all that stuff. But when the team is getting out coached, when they're getting beat, you're right. He's got that blank look, that blank stare on his face, like he doesn't know what he's doing. So again, I don't know if there's more going on that we don't see on the cameras, or what might be said in the headset, but it still kills me that I don't think we've ever seen him take the defense aside, all 11 players that were on the field, or every position group, and just rip them to shreds when they're not playing well. Give him a little kick in the ass. We saw Dable do it with Daniel Jones early in the year. I can't recall a moment where Saleh's done that with a player or with his entire defense. LaFleur got to go. That's going to be the biggest decision, I think, whether or not they decide to bring LaFleur back for year 3, or if they want to experiment trying to run a new offense. Who does LaFleur have, or who does he have connections with to potentially bring in there? A lot of questions. A lot of questions. Becton and AVT are absolutely essential next year. It all begins with the solid O-line. If anything this year has proven that if you can't protect your quarterback and if you can't open holes for your running back, then you don't have anything. That is true, but there are also plenty of teams that deal with injuries on their O-line. There were a number of years where Brady had nobody, and if you're a good quarterback, you know where the pressure's coming from, you know the defensive looks, you're able to get the ball out quick, you could overcome it. But if you don't have a running game, it's very hard. And for the Jets, they just don't have that elite quarterback yet to overcome some of the issues on the O-line. Mike White was getting beaten up today. I think he got what was it, like 19 hits that or pressures that the Seahawks had on top of 3 or 4 sacks. So not ideal, and it's been that way for the last number of weeks. The O-line's been bad since Fan came back for whatever reason. So we'll see what happens. Have fun in Miami. Win or lose, don't stress the game. It's meaningless for us. Just enjoy your time out there. Well, unfortunately, I will not be in Miami. Tyson will be in Miami. I waited to book the trip until the Jets were going to win yesterday, and since they did not, I'm probably not going to Miami, although it is my birthday weekend, so I am tempted to still potentially book a flight and just hang out for the weekend, but I'll probably just save my money. That taking receipts comment came back. Absolutely it did. Absolutely it did. When he said it at initially, we were all just like, dude, teams, what was it? Were they 1-2 at the time? Like, what are you doing? Why are you putting all this pressure on yourself? Why put the spotlight on your back? And initially, yeah, it seemed like it worked. The team responded, and they were playing great for a while. And now it's that's what everyone's gonna be talking about. Where's your receipts, coach? Why did the team collapse? 5 games in a row. You just needed to win one game. You had 5 chances. You just needed to win one, and we'd have a shot going into next week. Incredible. Giants took Daboll and won more games with less than no talent and a trip to the playoffs in his first year. Facts is Saleh and his staff are over their heads, and if you don't see it, then you're blind. Saleh is a rah-rah guy. He doesn't know how to face adversity. He'll be gone 2 years from now. Well, I'll take it a step further. I'll say he'll be gone a year from now if the Jets don't make the playoffs, or if next year is the same kind of year where the Jets are just hovering around 500, or they start strong and they collapse, or they start slow. And even if they do finish strong, if they don't make the playoffs, I don't see any way that Saleh comes back. 3 years, enough talent on your roster. If he doesn't make the playoffs with a collapse mixed in there, I don't think he'll be back. As a Bills fan, I'm waiting to see you guys again, but your 7 straight losses makes that impossible. Yep, another one of Saleh's great quotes. We were hoping to see you guys again. Enjoy the playoffs again, Buffalo. Just remember, though, that you guys were us once. I remember when you guys first clinched the playoffs for the first time in I don't know how many years it was, but just remember that we're pretty much in the same boat that you guys were once in. So have a little sympathy for us. O-line injuries, Hall after the season, Zach Wilson struggles. Saleh lets rookies trash the quarterback. White does his one-game superstar routine. OC calls head-scratching plays on 3rd down. Call Sean Payton and give him what he wants. I don't know if Saleh's going to, or if Johnson's going to do it, but the other part of that is, if you do make the phone call, let's just say, they make the phone call, they try to gauge whether or not, Sean Payton's actually interested. If Sean Payton's smart, he'll use the Jets to get more money from somewhere else or somebody else that, he wants to go. And then eventually all of that leaks out. and you find out that your owner was talking to other coaches, and that creates a whole bunch of new problems. So obviously, I don't think like Saleh would just quit, but it creates problems if you find out your owner's messing around trying to talk to other coaches, gauging interest and things like that. And if Douglas is supposed to be the guy with all the power to make football decisions, was he involved in that decision? It creates problems. So unless you're actually going to make some moves, it's hard to open up that can of worms without it really getting out there. So well said, man. Appreciate that. Okay, we know about Zach. Now we know about Mike. And now we know about the coaching staff. We were out coached these last 5 games. It is now possible to say Zach wasn't coached up properly. However, looking forward, the coaching staff should be highly scrutinized. No, well said. I think it is fair to question the development of Zach. The big thing that stands out to me is not so much what the Jets surrounded him with, because we're looking at past quarterbacks like Geno and Sam, and we're saying like these guys had absolutely nothing to work with as far as receivers. Like Geno Smith was throwing to David Nelson and Stephen Hill his first year. Darnold had no weapons, no O-line, Dowell Loggins, learning a new system in year 2. Like those quarterbacks had nothing. And if you want to say LaFleur is still a giant question mark, that's fine. But Zach still had a strong running game for a large part of this year. Three good receivers. If you want to count a healthy Corey Davis in there, because he had some good games early in the year, mixed in with some drops and penalties. But the weapons that Zach's had to work with is a lot more than some other young quarterbacks are working with, and a lot more than other Jets quarterbacks have had in the past that have failed. So the one, I guess, part that I'll say that the team did fail him on is by starting him right away. Because once you start him right away, you cannot undo that clock. Once the clock starts going, you can't undo it. You can't go back. You can't, freeze time, rewind time. Once his clock starts, the expectation is that he's going to get better. And, when your quarterback's regressing and going backwards, it's hard to come back from that. It is. I think the Jets are going to try very hard to keep Zach in the fold. I don't think they're just going to give him up for nothing. But, once the fan base and the media turn on you, especially in this town, and I'm sure Gino was, talking to Zach about that when they spoke after the game, it's hard to come back from that. And you just wonder, like, does Zach just want to change the scenery now? Is he just going to want out and get a fresh start somewhere? It creates a lot of questions. It really does. And again, Saleh, LaFleur, they don't have any history with developing a quarterback. So yeah, I think it's definitely fair to question, how they developed him, how they just threw him out there, giving him the starting job, not earning it, giving him the C on his jersey this year, making him a captain. Again, I know that was apparently voted for by the players, but should this kid have really been a captain in his second year? Should he have really been a starter in his first year? Did they throw way too much at him before he was ready? And it's clear he wasn't ready. So from that standpoint, I'll say that they failed Zach, but I also think that Zach just had to play better. Guys are open, he's not hitting them. You can't blame coaching on that. You can't blame the receivers on that. You call a play that gets a receiver open, you got to make the throw as a quarterback. So don't be negative, or the new progressive fan base will be mad at you. Listen, we always try to be fair on here, but we're always going to be negative when shit like this happens. I don't even think it's negative. I think it's being realistic. When you've seen the same story play out year after year, when you haven't made the playoffs 12 years in a row, when you haven't seen a home playoff game in over 2 decades, yeah, you have every right, I think, as a fan, especially if you're a season ticket holder, you invest your time, your money into this team. You have every single right to voice your opinions and your frustrations. But I get it. There's a new, like you said, progressive fan base out there that doesn't really enjoy the negativity, that wants to always support their players and coaches, and they feel that being a good fan is just supporting the team no matter what. I will never align with that philosophy, so apologies. The problem is systemic from the top down. I assume that's talking about ownership, which I would agree. And I think we saw that also with the Mets and just how that, festered with the Wilpons for so long. The questions about why the hell I waste my Sundays on this team are getting stronger and stronger. It's not worth it. At this point, I mean, you're invested so long. It's like, how do you stop now? I've spent my entire life going to games, season ticket holder, watching every single game. It's like, I give up next year, and then they win it 2 years later. It's like, damn, that sucks. This is what we do. Unfortunately, we're a glutton for punishment. We love the torture, I guess, but hopefully one of these years we get it figured out. At least if we can get a couple years of good football, some playoff games. I just miss having that. And not to further belabor the point, but the whole idea of rebuilding was that you'd have a consistent winner, playoffs year after year, like the Bills and the Packers and a lot of these teams do, Chiefs. You want to be there year after year, and like the whole idea behind all these rebuilds and everything, like the whole idea was to get there and to get back year after year after year, and to ultimately win a championship. And so the thought that we've done all of this the last 10 years with all these different rebuilds, all these different GMs, head coaches, and when it finally looked like we were starting to turn the corner and get it right, when we were 6-3 and 7-4, to get to that point and to possibly think it was just all, it was all in our heads, it was all a fluke, and that we might be here again 2 years from now, another quarterback, I don't even want to think about that. Here it is. Toxic fan base. You don't think players feel the hate? Who is going to want to go there, especially young quarterbacks? Time to look in the mirror, Jets Nation. So I'm trying to understand this comment. I saw it when it first popped up. Are we saying that the Jet fan is responsible for Zach Wilson playing poorly? Because I don't know where the fan base gets blame when every fan base in football, they boo, they talk shit to players on social media. I don't agree with any of that, but that's every single fan base in the NFL. Jet fans who have been watching losing football for 12 years straight, I think probably have every single right to voice those frustrations and be a little bit more agitated in their opinions. We're never gonna defend the fans out there. We saw a few examples over the past couple of weeks, with interactions with Douglas and Zach Wilson's mom. Like, we're never gonna defend the fans that are going after players or GMs or coaches personally or their family and messaging them. But like the criticism, the booing, like all the media stuff, like that comes with the territory of being a quarterback in a New York market. If Zach doesn't have the thick skin to be able to overcome it, guess what? He was never going to be the quarterback to begin with. So I ultimately think like they were trying to do him a favor. They realized he wasn't ready. He was losing the locker room. He was losing the fan base. And it was an opportunity for him to try to sit and to try to salvage his career and to get his head on straight and to restore some confidence. Whether it was, again, playing this year, ultimately, working things out in the offseason, maybe getting a shot next year. But regardless of what Mike White did, Zach was still not ready to play. It doesn't change that conversation. That conversation doesn't change at all. Mike White could have thrown 400 yards, 5 touchdowns. Mike White could have thrown 5 picks. It doesn't matter because Zach should not have been out there. He had a large enough sample size to show what he could do, and he didn't perform. He couldn't make the basic throws. We don't need to go into it again, but Zach shouldn't have been out there, and it has nothing to do with the fan base running him out of town or booing him off the field. He wasn't good enough. That's why. I expected the Jets to double their win total from last year, but starting at 6-3, and now this is a 5-game losing streak, is a major disappointment. Things must change during the offseason, and the Jets need more speed on the team. There is no D for speed, and Happy New Year to you and all Jet fans. As usual, go Jets from Detroit. Daryl, appreciate that, man. It's funny because at the beginning of the year, I think we all kind of had that same feeling of like 7 to 8 wins, maybe 9 if everything goes perfect. But make progress, develop your young players. Let's get answers about the head coach, about the quarterback, and yeah, it's at 6-3. I think expectations absolutely changed because we all saw that there was enough talent on this team to compete and to win. So naturally, your expectations are going to go up. It's not like they had a vaunted schedule in the second half. Some good teams in there, but certainly, I don't think any more challenging than the first half. And they just didn't get it done. Other teams made adjustments to what they were doing well, and the Jets never found a way to recapture that magic that they had in the fourth quarter of games. It sucks. They got schooled today, plain and simple. Yes, they did. Look at what Dable got out of the Giants roster. Saleh seems to have the same game plan every week, no matter the team. You're kind of right. You're kind of right. When has he really adjusted the game plan to be very specific towards what the opposing offense was trying to do? Whether it's quarterback specific, mobile quarterbacks. We haven't really limited them at all this year. Who knows what Justin Fields would have did to us? If he would have played that game when we played Chicago. But yeah, it doesn't seem like the game plan week to week requires a whole lot of work. Again, I don't know what they're doing in practice. I don't really want to know, but whatever it is that they're doing, it doesn't seem like it translates to game day, especially the first quarter. The way that this team has come out flat week after week, especially on offense, it raises a lot of eyebrows and questions about just what are they doing in practice, and why is it not translating on game day. So absolutely. Tired of this year after year, and the part that's even sadder is that I can't think of any other fan base that's as loyal as the Jet fans have been for so many years of not winning anything. Main people I blame for this are the owners of this team, who should honestly start to step in a lot more or sell the team if they don't care. Well, I actually don't have much of an issue with the owners being a little bit more hands off, just because for so many years they would interfere with player personnel decisions, or force head coaches to work with GMs and vice versa. So I don't mind that the Johnsons are staying out of it. But yeah, the one thing I think that we all would like to see is, if Saleh isn't going to work out, and I'm open to giving him another year, but if Saleh isn't going to work out, or if you already have questions about him, make the call to Peyton and be willing to give him a blank check. The same thing that we were talking about with Harbaugh 2 years ago, when there was a possibility maybe that the Jets could get Harbaugh. Give him a blank check, whatever he wants. If you believe that he's the guy that can really turn the culture around here, and you worry that the lingering effects from a collapse like this, it brings me back to the Mets in 2007, honestly. And I remember, I'll probably talk about this tomorrow night on the show, but I remember so clearly in 2007, after the Mets collapsed, they lost to the Marlins, blew a 7-game lead in the division with 17 left. I remember, on my drive home from work, I'm listening to Francesa on the radio, and he nailed it by saying flat out that a collapse like this is going to linger. You need to clean house. Nobody's going to recover from this. And the Mets never did. They collapsed again the following year. Willie Randolph eventually got fired. The team eventually broke up. Reyes, was gone. Wright was getting hurt every other year. Delgado, Beltran, they were eventually, the team never recovered from that. And I think that's what you worry about with this. Obviously, it's not a veteran team. It's a younger team. So you would hope and feel pretty good that they could bounce back and not let it become the norm. But just the same old Jet stigma that they all walked into, and then to experience this the first year, it sucks. It sucks. And yeah, I think it's legit to question whether or not Saleh is going to be able to bounce back from this. Bozo Lozo, thanks for laughing. Oh, once again, the pain. This is an epic collapse. You must call to see if Sean Payton's available. Jim Harbaugh and Frank Reich are other candidates to be considered. The Jets cannot hire first-time head coaches. Only established winning NFL coaches like Bill Parcells will do well here. I'm sure Saleh and LaFleur will win, but not here, just like Pete Carroll. I mean, that's fair. I think that's what we all wanted, 2 years ago. We got talked into Saleh. He was that motivational rah-rah guy, but prior to the interview process really getting started, nobody really mentioned Saleh, and all the talks were around proven NFL coaches, somebody with an established resume for developing quarterbacks, and the Jets went exactly the opposite. We should have cherished Geno. We should have raised Sam Darnold, but we let them off the hook. Now we have a quarterback, Zach, having a hard time learning his ABCs, and Mike White, who's more of a backup than a dump truck. Mike LaFleur takes play calling from Madden 23, and the team and staff's a joke. Adam Gase went 7-9 in 1920. Robert is identical to Adam. Wow. Well, a lot to unpack in that. I don't know if we should have cherished Geno, but I'll agree on one thing. With him and Zach both, there was a certain level, I think, of immaturity with both of them that made it difficult when it came to the media, the fan base, and everything else, where eventually the team just had to move on. And who knows if it would have been different, if not for the whole IK and Polly thing, and maybe Geno takes that 2015 team to the playoffs, and and he's still the Jets quarterback. Who knows? But part of him not being the Jets quarterback, like I just said, was part of the issue with IK and Polly, and that was part of Geno being a little bit immature. I don't remember all the details, but I know IK paid for Geno his flight for a plane ticket to some kind of event that he was doing. Geno couldn't show up, never paid back the plane ticket, and then IK punched him in the face. That was an instance, I think, of Geno being a little bit immature and not handling a situation right, and it came back to bite him, and it ultimately cost him his job. And I think Zach has had similar moments, obviously not to that extent where a player's, punching him in the face, but moments that he probably regrets, probably things that hopefully he learns from going forward and wishes he handled differently. But he's a young quarterback. I'm not ready to completely give up on him. I know some people are. I never liked him to begin with. As far as coming out of the draft, I never thought he was going to be a franchise quarterback. but he does have the physical tools, and he's put it on display at times. He's shown you those flashes. I feel like I'm talking about Darnold and Geno again because that was the same conversation where they would show you those flashes in moments, but it was never consistent enough. So if you think Zach can ultimately be consistent, I don't see any reason why you can't run it back, for another year with him as your, QB3 while some veterans are in front of him. But it's also a lot of money to pay for a QB3. Season started downhill with the JFN penalty, verse up 17-3 with them now being one-dimensional, only up 10-3. Then Saleh leaving Zach in too long for second Pat's game. If he benched Zach at halftime, went to Mike White, he would have preserved Zach's confidence and the intention of going back to him next game. Defense bend but don't break all year. Time management gaps by Saleh. Bad play calling by Mike LaFleur. Shitty O-line, you name it. Whatever could have went wrong with this team did. That's pretty spot on. To me, where the season really went downhill was, like you said, the Patriot game. Zach was left in way too long for that one. He should have been benched at halftime. Defense only gave up 3 points that game. They never should have even punted the ball to the Patriots at the end. Should have just punted it out of bounds. You get that game back, and things are completely different. You get any one of the last 5 games back, and things are completely different. But that one seemed most winnable. The defense was absolutely dominant that day, and you just needed a couple field goals to win it. So it's a shame that game had to go the way it did. Defense has been bend but don't break all year. Yeah, and that's also something we were talking about too. The defense all year was giving up some yards, but ultimately not really giving up a lot of points. They were getting the ball back for the offense quite a bit. And then for whatever reason, the last 5-6 games, it just seems like a lot more sustained drives. Even if they would hold the team to a field goal, they were out there for a lot longer. They weren't getting those takeaways. They weren't getting those big sacks, and it was just a vanilla kind of lifeless defense the last few weeks. Shaking my head, this organization is a scam. They must be tied into Vegas gambling. This was why Coach Belichick left the next day, because he wanted to win championships and not play pretend football. Man, this just sucks that we're even here right now. This just sucks that we're even here. When your own head coach is up there making excuses after every loss, then what kind of message does that send to the rest of the team? We can scream about LaFleur, and yes, his play calling has sucked, but at the end of the day, it's Coach Saleh's team. He should be demanding accountability, effort, and change if necessary. That's partially true. Ultimately, it all falls on Saleh. He even said that, in his presser at the end of the game today. If he doesn't like something that LaFleur is calling, if he's got an issue with the game plan during the week, it falls on him. He has every right to take over play calling, to demand that something be changed, to take over play calling from Ulbrich if he doesn't like it. I don't know if he has that in him though. Is he going to undermine anybody on his staff, especially when so recently he was a defensive coordinator? I don't know. There's a lot that I question with Saleh as far as just his leadership, especially when things are going wrong. He's great when things are going well, but when things are going wrong in the moment, I don't know how much trust I have. It isn't all on Zach Wilson. That is clear now. No, it's not. I'll say what I said before again. It's not all on Zach, but I still say him, or just the quarterback position in general, has been the biggest problem all year, and it's why we're not in the playoffs. But, this 5-game losing streak, you can look at everything and everyone. Every coach, every position group, nothing has been good over these last 5 games. Braden Mann's been terrible. Berrios has been terrible. Zerline's missed a couple field goals. Field position's been awful. They don't get takeaways. They give the ball over. Can't run the ball. Can't get pressure. Penalties. Can't complete the ball. Can't operate in the red zone. What have they done well the last 5 weeks? So yeah, it's not all on Zach, but it doesn't change that I think for however many games he started this year, he was still the biggest problem in those games. Let's think correctly this time and get us a lineman. Need an O-line ASAP and a real quarterback. Need to trade for one. Yeah, it's amazing that we're looking at this offensive line the way we are, talking about at least 2 new starters next year, possibly 3. For all the investments that I've put into that O-line, it's amazing that we're talking about a new O-line again. Disappointed in Let's Talk Jets. This should be a good comment. Oh, it's a long one too. All right, I'll read this whole thing. Why aren't you making the obvious case Douglas should be fired? Hear me out. White, Wilson, Flacco, and Streveler collectively gives Jets the worst quarterback situation in the league. I'd argue outside of the Jets, none of them would be on another team's roster this year, yet they are all collecting checks. Niners traded up for Lance, and he has done nothing, but They paid out 40 mil to keep Garoppolo as insurance. They found last pick and draft Brock Purdy, who's won 4 games. Browns went after Watson while Baker's still on the roster, but they still signed Brissett and Joshua Dobbs as insurance. Lamar Jackson's been hurt last 2 years. Ravens found a backup, Huntley, to run that offense, take them to the playoffs. Rams went to the Super Bowl 3 weeks ago while Zach was struggling. They picked up Baker off waivers for $2 million. He won 2 games for them since while he was in a 6-game losing streak. Why would the Jets pick up Baker in waivers and cut Flacco, who won't play, or Streveler even as that's sort of valid. I think at the time Baker was, I don't know. I don't know if you want to bring Baker into this, but I feel like he's more just like in that he would have been in that Zach Wilson mode, the former first round pick that got cut, and with all the media here, I don't know if this would have been a good place for Baker, but you can make a valid argument that they should have picked up somebody else once it was clear that Flacco shouldn't have been on the field. Douglas' number job in 4 years was find a competent quarterback via trade, free agency, or draft by any means necessary, first round or seventh, and somehow we wind up with Mike White, 38-year-old Flacco, and Streveler. It's unacceptable that we literally had a chance to make the playoffs in 10 years because Douglas failed to acquire any quarterback that could play. Douglas actually went into last season with just White and Wilson, having to trade for Flacco back mid-season. I'm sorry, but Douglas has no clue on quarterbacks. None. It's actually, I mean, that's a pretty well thought out comment. I don't think he should be fired, only because I do think his past draft was relatively successful. Yes, he had a lot of picks, and I know some people think those were just no-brainers, but I'll give him credit for the past draft that he had. I'll give him credit for the AVT pick, but you're right, though. I mean, quarterback is the biggest decision, and all these other teams had kind of plan A, plan B, and to some extent plan C. And for the Jets, like, I'm not going to kill having Mike White here, but should they have gone after somebody better? With the obvious concerns that they had about Wilson last year, with him not really taking that giant step, did they get maybe swayed by the end of the year where he just cleaned up all the turnovers and he wasn't throwing picks, and they're like, all right, year 2 his natural talent's going to come out. All we need's a Mike White or a Flacco. I don't know, but in the games that Mike White was needed prior to the rib injury, he played pretty well. In the first 3 games of the year, obviously Flacco very limited as far as mobility and things like that. Team went 1-2, but he was able to throw the ball, and the Jets were able to move the ball at times. So, it's a fair comment. It's a fair argument. I think they could have gone after somebody else, but at the end of the day, I think if you had a healthy Mike White, maybe this game goes a little bit differently. If you make the switch at halftime of one of those Patriot games, maybe things goes differently. There's so many what ifs, woulda, coulda, shoulda. I think the bigger thing though with Joe Douglas, and I talked about free agency before, but the offensive line too. That's supposed to be his bread and butter. He's the O-line guru. You want to develop a quarterback? Give him a dominant O-line. That's how you set your quarterback up for success. So with all the investments that we've made on that O-line to be sitting here talking about rebuilding that again, along with the quarterback, it's not crazy to start the conversations about firing Joe Douglas. I'm not there yet. If you are, I mean, I don't have any issue with somebody that thinks, all right, we've seen 3 years, it's time to move on. But I think you also have to take into account what they were rebuilding, what they tore down, some of the bad contracts that were still on the books. So at least kind of flipping things a little bit at the beginning of the year and realizing that you have some young talent here, I think that does go a long way. But at least for right now, the collapse being fresh in your mind, it's hard to look at anything else and just wonder, what that does and what that means for the future, if that lingers, and yeah, ultimately how it affects Joe Douglas. Because now there's a giant spotlight on his back going into this offseason to solve a lot of issues, a lot of important issues. The head coach you hired, he's got to be the guy. Going into year 3, he's got to be the guy. Quarterback, you got to figure out. O-line, you got to figure out. Still probably need another pass rusher. Tight ends haven't looked so great this year. Linebackers towards the end of the year looking slow. There's a lot to figure out still on this roster. So by no means does Joe Douglas get a pass from me. I'm just not on the fire Joe Douglas train yet. I'm sorry, but Saleh isn't head coaching material. He needs to be fired ASAP. Again, same thing with Saleh. Good motivator, good speaker. I like him when things are going well. I think he's a good dude. Somebody that I'd enjoy having a beer with and just talking football with. Don't know if I want him as the X's and O's head coach of my team yet. Need to see a little bit more for that, but I think he'll get a third year to figure it out. We have never been able to develop a quarterback without a high-profile coach running the show. That's absolutely true. Absolutely true, and I think it's why so many people wanted the proven coach and the proven quarterback developer 2 years ago instead of somebody that didn't have a resume with that. L's on Saleh. He seems to be outcoached or unprepared as well as bad clock management. Detroit game, Jets made Hawks look better than they are. Completely agree. The Jaguar game too. They weren't ready for a lot of the stuff that the Jaguars were doing on offense. Trevor Lawrence rolling out. Unprepared, outcoached. Completely agree. Jet fans couldn't wait to boo and shit all over Zach, a 23-year-old kid. I mean, Jet fans are going to boo anybody that's playing bad. And I think it's not just Jet fans. Like I was saying before, that's every fan base. It wasn't personal towards Zach. It's what every fan base does. If you're not playing well, they're going to boo. That's what it is. So Zach was not playing well, and regardless of Mike White, like I was saying before, regardless of Mike White or Flacco or whoever got in there, whether they played great or they played like shit, it doesn't change the fact that Zach was not ready. Could the fans have gone easier on him? Maybe. But again, I think that part of it was Zach's own doing with the comments he made about do you feel like you let the defense down? No. There's some things he could have handled better himself. Yes, he's a 23-year-old kid. Probably there should be part of the fan base that realizes, yeah, he's got some growing up and maturing to do. But when you're in must-win games with the playoffs on the line, you're not thinking about the future. You're thinking about what do we got to do to win these games. For most fans, I don't think it was personal with Zach. I know there's a certain small percentage that I think yes, it was very personal, and the attacks were personal and the booing was personal. But for most fans, legitimate fans, I don't think the hatred towards Zach was meant to be in any way personal. It was a simple fact that the rest of the team developed faster than he did. The Jets were a potential playoff team this year. They had a chance to make the playoffs 5 weeks in a row, or at least to keep their playoff chances alive. And once it became apparent that Zach was regressing, that he was losing confidence, that the players around him didn't have confidence in him, I think the only thing to do was to bench him. So I don't think it's what anybody wanted, but if you want to save his career, you want to save him in that locker room and still give him a chance, I think they had to bench him. So, should they have booed him? I mean, I don't even know if it was entirely at Zach or just the entire team for playing like shit. But I know it was personal for some people, and I'm not going to agree with that. I'm not going to agree again with the messages that were sent to his mom and all that bullshit. But most fans around the league, if they're watching bad football and they're paying to watch it, they're going to boo. Trade for Carr, not a terrible idea, but huge contract. I don't know if they're going to go that direction. Being a Jets fan will go down as one of my lifetime bad decisions, another failed season with more questions than answered. Man, imagine how much happiness we would have in life if we picked better sports teams. And at least some of you guys, you get the Yankees and, I don't get shit. Mets, Jets, Knicks, and Rangers. A 1994 Stanley Cup when I was 6 years old. I say it all the time because it never changes. Obviously, it hasn't changed. I haven't seen a championship since 1994. 29 years, I'm only 34 years old. 35 next week. Haven't seen a championship since I was 6 years old for any of my 4 major sports teams. Crazy. New Year's reminder that y'all passed on Justin Fields. Happy New Year. You don't got to remind me about that. I did the video saying the Jets should have taken Justin Fields number 2, so you don't got to remind me about that. Robert Saleh is not a good coach. He continues to look overwhelmed and unprepared, and other head coaches have picked up on it. Yeah, completely agree. Unprepared, overwhelmed, doesn't know what to do when shit hits the fan. In-game adjustments on defense have not been there. The fourth quarter dominant team that's just taking over games and dragging teams into those dark waters that he talked about, none of that has been there the last few weeks. And the final comment, I'll just refresh to make sure there's no, 2 more comments. Today was the difference between a Hall of Fame coach and a motivational speaker. Well said. And the last one, it's going to be this revolving cesspool until we get new owners. Simple as that. It starts at the top. Everyone needs to go. Man, I get the emotions right now. 24 hours still after the game. There's going to be that feeling. Just fire everybody, clean house. I want to wait until things settle a little bit. I don't want to just fire everyone and start over without knowing who's out there or what we could bring in, and without even acknowledging that, like, yes, there was some good to come out of this season. It's not worth talking about right now. Again, you just lost 5 in a row. You just had an epic collapse. I don't have any desire at all to talk about some of the positives, like Sauce and Garrett Wilson and all that, but it's tough right now. I'm not ready to fire everybody. I think somebody will get fired. I don't think it's going to be Douglas. I don't think it's going to be Saleh, but I think somebody probably gets fired or somebody else gets brought in, like a quarterback coach, and that's going to be what the Jets tout as their big change, along with probably another quarterback. So appreciate you guys tuning in. I can't believe this actually lasted over an hour. I probably should have just written all the comments, but this was pretty cool doing it this way. I might do this a little bit more. So appreciate all the comments, appreciate all the feedback. Thank you guys very much. Thank you to everybody that tuned in for the live stream today. I wish it could have been a little bit more positive and on a more positive note, but Happy New Year. Same old shit. 2023. Talk to you guys later.